Hello and welcome to the Mac Gamecast episode 24. I'm John Carr, as always, here with Sam, triumphantly returning to the show in 2022, and of course, Mr. Ted. How you doing, gents?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Today, we are going to continue talking about sort of a continuation of the topic from last podcast, which was Microsoft buying Activision-Blizzard. There's been more of that going on. But the general idea, Sam and Ted had some particular thoughts on basically studio acquisitions, maybe its impact on the industry. Is that good or not for gamers? This kind of stuff. That's going to be our main topic. And depending on the time, we may get into some other interesting stuff, or that may be saved for future episodes. We'll get there. So yeah, Sam, I think you had sort of some starter thoughts here. I'll let you take the floor.
Yeah, so interesting topic I thought we'd discuss is obviously all the acquisitions have been going on. Everybody's, I'm sure, heard of them. It's a $68 billion Activision-Blizzard King deal, what that Microsoft did, and then more recently Sony bought Bungie. And last year, Microsoft bought Bethesda and all their like Machine Games and Arcane and all the studios go along with them. So the industry's obviously changing quite a bit. I can remember, it seems like almost I kind of measure gaming in like console generations as in terms of the chapters of gaming.
Right.
In almost every previous generation, essentially every game was available everywhere, and you'd have the handful, like 10 or less exclusives for each platform. Sony obviously has a couple, like God of War and Last of Us and stuff, and then Microsoft hasn't been doing too well recently, but previously to that, they had Halo and Gears of War and stuff like that. So 99.9% of games you could play literally anywhere you wanted. Of the major platforms, we wish more would come to Mac, but
yeah.
But I think with these acquisitions, we're seeing the gaming industry do what the music industry did first with its switch to streaming, and the TV followed with Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime Video and all that. And now we're kind of seeing the gaming industry not switch fully, but dip its toes a little bit. We see it with Game Pass. That's obviously been hugely... Well, I think it's been hugely successful. They're a little bit cagey about profitability, but I think it's kind of a lost leader that will eventually be hugely profitable for Microsoft. Sony has, I forgot the code name, but their competitor to Game Pass coming out very soon, within, I think, this quarter, maybe, or maybe next quarter at the latest.
It's always PlayStation something or the other. Yeah. Yeah,
I think it's called, I forget, it has some weird code name. That's not going to be the real name, but yeah, so we're seeing basically the borders be drawn in the gaming space, and people sort of set up and essentially a land grab of all the studios. So yeah, that's kind of setting the stage, I guess, what you guys have probably covered in previous episodes, but I have some thoughts, but do you guys have anything you'd like to share on that before deeper thoughts? Sort of the changing industry as well?
This is like a throwaway comment, but when you said, Bungie bought, I was going to say it'd be really funny if Bungie, we're buying Sony, that would just be hilarious. I would love that, actually. I have a soft spot for Bungie, as a youth and all their Mac games and stuff, but, I didn't forgive them, 20 odd years ago for quote unquote selling out. But, I don't want to make this all about Bungie, but as a quick aside, in the last year or two, I actually did some digging and found some random YouTube videos. It turns out Bungie was in dire straits financially, actually. Oni was a total mess. They had to bring on a bunch of new project directors and rework the game and just kind of push it out the door. And they were their future was in jeopardy, actually, if they didn't sell to Sony.
Well, they had the catastrophic, I think it was Myth. You guys remember better than me. I was too young to really play that game, but that was the game that had the uninstall bug where it wiped your PC or your Mac.
Yeah,
you told
right,
and that destroyed their reputation and it cost them so much money. And that was actually really just close to when they got bought by Microsoft the first time way back.
And they had to recall a bunch of copies, and I think it was a PC bug, not a Mac bug. At least it worked fine on my Mac because I bought all the Myth games and played them all from disc and everything, and it was fine.
It may have just been PC then, but yeah, they were really in the dumpster for reputation, and I think their coffers were completely empty paying for this massive recall.
Right, exactly. So
this is like I guess the internet existed, but pre days of patching willy nilly with some.
Exactly, you can't just here's a day one patch to fix the problems. Let's talk about Bungie a bit. We talked a lot about Microsoft buying Activision-Blizzard, though I'd still like to hear your thoughts on that, Sam. But we'll swing back to it. Because since we had the podcast, I think a couple days later, the news came out Sony bought Bungie, as you already mentioned. But apparently, they aren't going to make Bungie stuff exclusive. So, it kind of begs the question, like, well, why did they buy them? If not to have, like, PlayStation first games kind of a thing. So, what's your take on that?
I fully believe them that Destiny won't become exclusive. Destiny is just obviously the nature of the game. It's like essentially an MMO light. It needs to be in as many places as possible. If it was only PlayStation, or even if it was only PlayStation PC, it would still be fine, but that game thrives off player counts.
Right.
And I don't think they have anything to gain by restricting platforms. But that being said, Bungie is expanding like crazy. They've opened up a few new studios. I think they're wanting to get into like TV and movies and stuff.
Right.
Which Sony obviously has their whole movie and TV side of things.
Right.
But I would be shocked if whatever Bungie does next is... I would bet a lot of money that it won't be on Xbox. And I would be surprised if it's day one on PC. I think it'll come to PC.
Right.
But I don't know if it would be day one PC. I don't think somebody spends $3.6 billion to keep status quo. I think they want to make some changes.
Exactly.
What about you, Ted? Any thoughts on the Bungie deal?
That, again, it goes back to my biggest concern about it is that, if there's going to be only ultimately 3 different studios, 3 different owners, they're going to control what happens. And we're going to get into the same kind of silly situation we get in with streaming of video, where, well, either you choose to pay a fee for every one of them, or you choose one and don't get something else. I chose this particular one, so I don't get to watch that particular show, type of thing. And unless I want to pay for it. And but then again, looking at it from a Mac gamer's viewpoint, I'm used to waiting a while for games to come around. So if I have to, play it when it's a year or 2 old, maybe, well, I guess it's maybe not a big deal. But I just don't see it as being a good thing for the consumers, and I see it being more of a good thing for the businesses if they can rope everybody in the mindset of, feed me, and we'll keep giving you stuff, which is, the way the subscription thing works. And, having been around for quite a while, it's kind of something I don't like, but it's just my own personal attitude on that.
Right. No, that makes sense. You mentioned 3 for the benefit of listeners. The third person he's referring to is EA. So basically, almost everyone is now owned by either Electronic Arts, Microsoft, or Sony, more or less.
Right.
There's still like notable quote unquote indie bigger groups out there like Larian Studios, or I think Starbreeze was maybe bought by one of those 3 recently. There were kind of like some bigger, like pretty notable. I mean, it's hard to call them indie because they aren't making tiny games. They're making huge games that are more like AA games rather than AAA.
We have Ubisoft is still, they're obviously not quite on the same level.
Oh, Ubisoft, right? Yeah.
Okay. They're like the big 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in Japan we have Squaresoft, I think.
Square Enix.
Square Enix.
Square Enix. That's true. Yeah. We do have them. So they do a lot of PC ports, but I don't know I guess they're publishing them too.
They're cozy with Sony currently.
That's what I was going to say. I think they're cozy with Sony. So I kind of lumped them together, I guess.
Yeah, that's incorrect. Owned by Sony yet.
Right.
Yet.
Right.
One thing
Right.
I think is interesting too is it seems like Sony has kind of awoken the the like dragon or the because like Microsoft is obviously on a whole other level compared to Sony. This would obviously never fly from like a regulatory perspective, but like Microsoft could easily buy Sony.
Right.
I think Sony's market value is like 160 billion, which is obviously a large number, but like Microsoft just spent 70 on Activision. So that's like,
Right.
and that was an all cash. That wasn't like a stock deal or anything. That was, I don't want Microsoft to buy Sony or anything like that. I don't think it would happen from a legality perspective, but
Right.
Sony in the PS4 gen, they obviously just like destroyed Microsoft, like well over 2-to-1 sales. They had a ton of these little exclusive deals where they would pay for like Call of Duty, for example. It wasn't necessarily an exclusive games, but they were paying a ton of third parties for PlayStation First stuff. And I'm not sure if you guys watched, I think it was a 4-part series that Xbox did on YouTube. It was really well done. Basically going through the history of Xbox from just the Xbox as a concept being brought together up until the launch of the Series X. But it's really cool how Xbox went from, basically they weren't sure if they were going to continue with the brand, and they were maybe going to pack up ship after Xbox One launched to such a horrible launch. And then here we have it now where they're spending hundreds of close to 100 billion on acquisitions. And they've, like, Sony's share price has plummeted. Microsoft's, I don't think Microsoft's actually way up, but it's such a bigger brand. But basically, they're doing what Sony can't even do that. Like, Sony doesn't have the money to compete with the sheer dollars. So
Right.
Sony's competing with their own studios, which I think is a little bit smarter. Microsoft's kind of taking the lazy, easier but much more expensive approach of let's just buy everything.
Right.
And this seems to be Microsoft's history a little bit. In that same docuseries I was talking about, when they wanted to get into the console space, Microsoft initially approached Nintendo and wanted to buy Nintendo. That was going to be their gateway into the console space if the deal went through. So they went out to Japan and they tried to talk to the Nintendo execs, and they basically got laughed out of the room. But that was like the initial plan. Let's buy. This would have been probably the N64 era.
Right. Yeah.
Let's just buy Nintendo, and that's how we're going to compete in the console space. So yeah. What was the main thought I had was, I think there's a lot of negatives for the consumer potentially down the road. Nothing's going to change in the next year or two, but 3, 4, 5 years out, we're going to see a lot of things changing, I think. But one of the hopeful, maybe positives I think we'll get out of this is, one thing I've noticed in the big AAA game space right now is the necessity for a game to sell extremely well in order to be branded as a success, or maybe get a sequel or whatever. And one game that comes to mind is Tomb Raider 2013, which is a Mac game. Really, I think it was a really good game. I still view it as like a somewhat recent game, but it's almost 10 years old now. That game came out and it sold millions of copies. I think it sold 3.5 million copies, and it was labeled a failure by Square Enix. And so you have, and then we have Battlefield 2042, which, ignoring the whole mess with bugs and stuff of that game, it sold millions of copies. It's labeled a failure. You can listen to EA's most recent earnings call. They're actually, failure wasn't the word, but disappointing, and they wouldn't say sales numbers. And so you have
they acknowledged it underperformed and
yeah. So you have these games right now that come out and they have to sell X million copies, or the publisher goes, that's not going to fly. And because of that, publishers will play it super safe. They'll say, we could release this new IP or maybe this new idea, or let the studio do what they want to do. But that might not sell 8 million copies. That might only sell 6 million. So instead, we'll say, nope, you guys got to do Call of Duty 36, and so that's going to sell 13% more copies, and that's that. So I'm hoping maybe when the streaming or subscription model comes out, that we can kind of get away from that, because the subscription model sales are just kind of the cherry on top, but the main goal is to just keep people subscribed. And if you're basically not trying to sell a copy of the game anymore, you're trying to sell the person on just being subscribed for another month or another year. So maybe that will allow for a little more variety or a little more freedom, but that's just hopeful thinking. I don't know. We'll see. What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, it's interesting about the subscription stuff. You guys know I'm big on it. I've advocated, at least for GeForce Now. Though GeForce Now is a little different because it uses your existing games, so you still have to buy the games, thereby sidestepping that issue. But Microsoft's Game Pass, Xbox Pass, PC Game Pass, whatever it's called, I can't quite get it straight. There's a few different versions. Maybe, I think there's actually 3 versions. That you subscribe to, much like Netflix or something, and it's just the library. So then, depending on your service, yeah, I can see Microsoft or whoever it is, PlayStation or whoever else might come up with a streaming service. There's a bunch of Amazon's doing one. There's a bunch called Luna. It's terrible. I tried it. But yeah, it's this idea of, again, if you take Netflix, which is the most common kind of de facto streaming platform, although there's now many, they have a lot of good content and then they have a lot of trash content. But the whole point is they can boast, well, we have so many titles and we have so many hours watched. And so translating that into the game space, it's like, oh, well, we have so many, we have 1,000 titles you can play. It's like, okay, but how many of them are actually like really good? And how many are just like filler sort of, I don't want to call them trash games because that's too harsh. I don't even know, but kind of like filler games, if you will. Kind of like these filler movies and TV shows. They're not terrible. They're fine. They're average. Maybe they throw in one, they throw in, Netflix has this, formula. They throw in like one big name actor and then like a really small script and budget or whatever and throughout the movie, and everyone watches it because it has X actor or actress in it. They can't quite do that with gaming because, there's not actors, there's voice actors in gaming, and there are notable ones people like. That typically isn't going to sell like millions of copies just because Nolan North is voicing your game or something. Like the game still has to be really interesting. My main issue with the consolidation, or not issue, my concern is more accurate, with the consolidation is something I saw with Electronic Arts. Again, this may not happen with Microsoft, but we'll see. Electronic Arts started forcing all the studios they bought not to use their Frostbite engine only. They couldn't use anything else. I believe any games they were working on when they were bought, they were allowed to finish, but any new projects had to use Frostbite. So like Sam said, I don't think anything will change in a year or two, but 3 to 5 years, we'll see a lot of changes. That's where I'm also looking, not like current development cycles, but like the next stuff people are working on, all the people meaning all these studios who were bought. Like what restrictions or parameters are they going to be given from like an engine standpoint, from an idea standpoint? Like Sam was saying, a suit might just like look at the numbers and be like, yeah, this isn't going to sell enough, or we don't project it'll sell enough, therefore, yeah, you can't greenlight this project. So I'm definitely concerned about that as well. And yeah, I think it's totally wild. A game can sell millions of copies and be labeled unsuccessful. It's what happened also to, speaking of Square Enix, to Deus Ex Mankind Divided, the second game in the reboot. I really wanted a third game. I absolutely loved that series. And I thought the game was pretty good, and it sold, again, a lot of copies. It wasn't as favorably received as Human Revolution, but yeah, they just never made another game because it was like, well, it didn't like go to the moon, So, and then they went on to make like Marvel Avengers and a bunch of other. I mean, that game was awful. I actually tried it on sale, and people are like, Deus Ex died for this, this terrible game, because it's the same studio. It's also the guys who did the Tomb Raider reboot. Like, these guys are good at making games. Guys, gals, whatever, the company, Crystal Dynamics. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but the point is, back to Frostbite and EA. The engine's really cool. It looks amazing. But it's meant for shooters. It was originally developed for Battlefield. But then they started mandating all their studios, aka BioWare and others, use this Frostbite engine for their RPGs and their action-adventure games and their this and that and the other. The engine wasn't made for it. And a bunch of these games, I'm really speaking of BioWare. Anthem apparently had a really troubled development because of the Frostbite engine. Same for the Mass Effect Andromeda. Never mind that the game had like a bunch of weird story issues and whatever. Didn't live up to kind of like the Mass Effect hype of the previous trilogy. I did, because I happen to like BioWare. I like Mass Effect. I did it. In fact, I pre-bought Anthem Deluxe Edition for like $80, like a crazy person. So, that kind of got burned. I still really like that game, even though it was labeled like a total failure. It does a lot of interesting things, but again, the developers were working on a 2.0 version of the game, like a total revamp, that like all stuff the players wanted, and then the suit somewhere just, it marinated for a year or so, and then they just pulled the plug because they projected, well, too bad, it kind of had it had a bad launch, sold a bunch of copies, didn't hold player counts, was deemed to kind of like 2 games smashed into one, and so I was really hyped for like the 2.0 version. It's going to be super cool, and they even had blog posts on what was coming down the pipe, and then sorry, it got canceled. So it's okay. So then we're talking. This is just player stuff. So then it's okay. We don't know the minds of the top level executives beyond. We know they're very concerned with profit and shareholders and all that stuff. Like that's the bottom line. So. But if everything's just about the bottom line, well, yeah, like you're saying, that could, as Sam was saying, it could stifle creativity. Like, yeah, you're making Call of Duty 36 or 40 or 50 and whatever. So I am a little concerned about that creative aspect. Like, I think EA might have relented now and let their studios use, like Unreal Engine 5 or whatever they want to use. Maybe, I doubt any of them are making games with Unity. Or even custom engines or something. The weird issue was apparently EA had one support team for Frostbite engine, and that one team had to manage support for every studio under EA using it, which was all of them. So they were often not free to help, and BioWare complained about this. They would call them up, email them, create tickets, and they would wait like weeks to get the help they needed to resolve issues and move forward, like to solve problems. Because they're like, sorry, we're busy helping, I don't know, what other studio, and, we're tied up. So, okay, that's dumb. Hire more people, but then they have to be trained. And anyway, it just didn't happen. Maybe they've resolved it by now. I don't see Microsoft being like, EA's kind of known to be a little tyrannical and micro-transaction heavy and this and that. I think they put out some good games, but they're also like, their rep from a player, like a gamer's perspective, is not particularly high, at least as far as I know. They've had a lot of just weird launches to their games, Star Wars games, Battlefield games, this and that. But that's just EA. Can I say everyone's going to act like EA? No, that's not fair. But they are all very big corporations with, again, a bunch of shareholders and executives and whatever. I do think, as far as I know, in Activision-Blizzard, I believe Bobby Kotick is getting ousted. Like, basically let go after a period of, once the merger or integration's complete, he'll be out of the way. But like, okay, he's like a known scumbag basically, but he made, he made Activision a lot of money. So he's a scumbag who's good at making money. Okay, that's not a good thing. It doesn't give him a pass from my eyes, but it clearly basically gave him a pass from a bunch of executives' eyes. People have been complaining about him for years and trying to get rid of him forever, and it's like he's just been kind of bulletproof. And the only reason he's getting let go now is because Microsoft bought him. If they didn't, I presume he just would keep being, the CEO. So my point is, okay, the known scumbag's out of the way, but now we're dealing with the unknown. I'm not saying they're all scumbags. I'm just saying, like, clearly, I mean, they're all businesses. They have to make money, and I don't begrudge anyone trying to make money. Just from a player perspective, I begrudge them stifling any like creativity or interesting ideas or sequels, or imposing, these kind of parameters on the devs under them. We've seen it happen. Some say there's, sometimes they say they're supposed to be more autonomous. Like I think Sony buying Bungie, they're supposed to remain more independent or something. But, Blizzard said the same thing when they merged with Activision, but that wasn't true. Shortly after their merger, this is going back a number of years, all the games started changing. They started firing 800, 1,000 employees. They basically gutted Heroes of the Storm. They started making weird decisions in Hearthstone, like really greedy, just more money-grabbing decisions. StarCraft has just been ignored kind of forever, honestly, so that didn't change much there. The quality of WoW just kept going downhill. That may or may not have anything to do with it. But a couple games were obviously, like, very quickly after they merged with Activision, changed drastically for the worse. And ex-employees and stuff later came out, the whole atmosphere changed. is all just about money pushing from Activision, because even though they were Activision-Blizzard, Activision owned them, I think, technically, like on paper. Like Activision was the boss, not Blizzard, even though they shared like their names on the wall, so to speak, Activision-Blizzard. And yeah, they say, the mood changed, bosses changed, the tone for making games and what they could do. And yeah, that's why teams got gutted and fired and changed and pulled and whatever. So once again, even if companies bought, and of course they say, we're going to be independent, or, we're owned by them, but we're totally, our creativity will be unhindered and rah, rah, rah. Like, I would love to believe it, but I don't know if I've seen a good example of that go on. I guess Bethesda's been doing fine, though they haven't really put out anything new in a while. Fallout 76 was a total dumpster fire, so then, well, maybe not. Yeah, anyway, I've been rambling a while. What do you think, Sam?
Well, I was going to say the Bethesda deal, this is just an example of how slow things move. Fallout 76 was, at least really bad initially. I haven't tried it. Apparently it's a lot better now, but who knows? Yeah. But just an example of how slow things move. There hasn't been a single, maybe there's been one or two, but there's been basically 0 games released for Microsoft since the deal. The deal got announced September of 2020, I believe. So we've had about a year and a half, and it got closed fully on March 2021. But I think next month, Bethesda's releasing a PS5 exclusive that's not on Xbox at all because of contracts that were signed before the deal. Right, which is an example of how slow the deals. Like, Bethesda has released games, but they've both been PS5 exclusives. And Ghostwire Tokyo comes out next month, and then I'm blanking. The one that just came out a couple months ago, by Arcane, the guys who did this.
Deathloop.
Deathloop, yes. So, and those are both PS5 exclusives. They were on PC as well, but not Xbox.
Console,
That's just an example. Microsoft bought this company about a year and a half ago. That company's still releasing exclusives for the Microsoft's competitor, just due to
right. That is really funny. That's a good point.
So, yeah, we won't see. It takes so long for stuff to move, but
right.
Ted, we haven't heard from you in a while. Do you have any thoughts on all this?
I've just been interested in listening to what you guys have been saying. There's a lot of good. I was thinking about, the original Bungie acquisition of Microsoft way back when, and I hadn't been aware of the fact that Bungie had, financial issues, which John just brought out. But I will say that it seemed like that was a good thing for Bungie ultimately. They released. I finally, after years later, managed to be able to play some of the games from the later Halo games, and I was quite impressed with some of the stuff. And I would have been a lot more impressed several years ago if it had made its way to the Mac. But it seems to me that one of the good parts of the acquisitions is if a company has a good deal, or it has a good idea, then but they don't maybe have the resources to be able to come up with it. If they can sell it to the new owner, they might be able to acquire the resources for it. So it goes both ways. There's a lot of, there has to be profit and there has to be money, but a really larger company might be willing to take a risk on something new. One would hope. and I was just thinking about that in my mind. It's like, will they do that, or will they go in the kind of the more negative direction of, well, if it isn't going to make money, we're not going to even consider it, or if we can't justify it based on a previous superstar, then we're not going to do it. It's obviously the movie industry has gone that way pretty much. So you don't see a whole lot of new ideas. You see a lot of old ideas rehashed or sequels. So but and that could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. So I'm just hoping for the best, and hoping that we continue to see games come out, and hopefully somebody will actually get interested in supporting Macs in the future.
Hopefully, I think maybe there'll be some hope, but I think as companies expand more, they'll view their service as the platform and not their hardware as the platform. Like I think Microsoft, it's already obvious. Like they don't really care if you own an Xbox. They just want you to subscribe to Game Pass. I know Game Pass isn't on Mac, but they're beyond like our piece of plastic that needs to sit in your entertainment center. They just care about your
right
$10 a month or whatever it costs.
Right. I think they have a $5, $10, and $15 tier, so it's like
okay,
escalating. Yeah.
And then one of the things I think hopefully will be a positive down the road of the subscription model is games are obviously really expensive, like brand new releases. Here in Canada, they're about 80 or 90 plus tax, so they're about $100 if you want to buy like a day one like brand new AAA title.
Right.
Obviously a little bit less in the States, but still close to 100. We're still paying probably 80, 75, 80 bucks with tax.
75, 80, yeah.
Yeah. So, and because of that, you have all these, especially younger players like teenagers and stuff like that, who don't have big incomes. Every time a game goes out, they need to decide, do I go with the tried and true, like whether it be Call of Duty or whatever other game they like, or do I take a chance on this other game? And it's like, well, it's a lot of money. I know I like Call of Duty because I bought it every year. And so this is like a month of income for me. I'm just going to buy the game I know.
Right.
Subscription model, you don't have any of that. All you have to do is convince them to press install and wait an hour or two for it to download.
Right.
So it allows for players to try a lot of games that they would have never tried previously, just due to, even if money's not an issue, it's like, even if it's $20, like sure, all of us $20, we probably blow that on dumb stuff often. But
yeah,
a game is like, it's a commitment, like it much more so than just the price. It's you got to install it, you got to patch it, you got to maybe convince some friends to play it if it's more like either multiplayer or like little online experience type game. And if games are $80 plus tax, that's hard to do. If you got a friend group of 5 or 6 people, you're trying to convince 5 people to drop that much money. Subscription model, you can all just press install, you can try it out. If you don't like it, nothing lost, except for some time, obviously. But
yeah,
so that'll be interesting. And then with sort of the subscription, is it good or bad? The consolidation I don't like, but I think the subscription, as long as we still have the option to buy games permanently, is a good option to have, because in TV we've seen sort of the golden age of TV, they call it, in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years. Coming out of that cable TV era, companies have dumped a ton of money into TV, hundreds or probably billions of dollars actually. And we've gotten all these massive shows that I don't know we would have seen on like a safe cable television network. I would compare the cable television networks as what we have currently in gaming, where it's like, well, I need to get X copies sold, so better stay safe and better plaster whatever IP is our most popular IP on this. And oh, John, you mentioned earlier with Netflix, they like to use one big actor. I think in games that presents itself as IPs, so they'll plaster I don't know, whatever popular IP, whether it be like Gears of War or like we don't want to see with Gears of War, but I'm trying to think of a good example. But you see it sometimes where it's like, why is this game like in this universe or like called this? But just to get more sales. But so yeah, that's some hopeful potential positives. We'll see, I guess. It is nice. I've been subscribed to Game Pass for a while, and it's pretty cool just like browsing without having to feel defensive in terms of like, well, I don't want to spend money on that. Like you can just install it and try it, and if you like it, awesome. And if you don't, awesome. It's especially more indie titles that I maybe wouldn't necessarily buy. There's not really a barrier. I've tried a couple out on my Xbox, and they're actually really fun. I would have never played those if it was not included in the subscription. So
makes sense. Yeah, I'd like to comment on some of your things. Funny enough, the PC Game Pass kind of works on a Mac because, well, obviously you can't download the games, but they have a browser, they have a stream option. So the Game Pass is weird because, yes, there's a download option, Microsoft's Game Pass. There's a download option and there's a stream option, but not everything is on streaming. But everything they have is on download, I think. But you need their max tier, their ultimate, gold, blah, blah. Their naming system drives me crazy. Anyway, you need their most expensive tier, but you can try it for $1, which I did. I don't know if it's a week or a month, I forget. And some games will work in a browser. Apparently it works in Safari or Chrome. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I tried it. But then, of course, it's like, well, you don't have a controller. So I launched Back 4 Blood. I don't own it. Again, this is through the streaming. And I'm like, oh, crap, I don't have a controller. Well, forget that. Then I'm like, wait a minute. Maybe there's like some workaround here. So I looked it up. And haha, there is indeed a Chrome extension which remaps a controller to your mouse and keyboard. So I'm like, ho. So then I logged out. Anyway, I set that up and tried it. And it does work. It's very clunky. It's very awkward. And currently the quote-unquote PC Game Pass on streaming, mind you, not download streaming, streams the Xbox version of the game. So the field of view is terrible, the resolution's not very good, the movement's sluggish and weird, it's not like made for PC. Microsoft did make a comment where I believe they're going to try to change that for the PC Game Pass eventually. I don't know when, it could take them years, where it's actually streaming you the PC version and everything, you can just play with your mouse and keyboard, but right now you can very awkwardly, I don't even know if it'll detect an Xbox controller in the browser, honestly. But you can very awkwardly map with a Chrome extension your mouse and keyboard and like fiddle around. Anyway, it's awkward, but it does work sort of, tiny bit. I don't have a controller, maybe but even if I did, I wouldn't try it because I don't like playing with a controller unless it's like a racing game. Like I can't play a shooter with a controller or whatever, or an action RPG. So the subscription stuff's cool. Subscription stuff is cool. The main point is options, right? We should have the option to keep being able to buy games if we want. Ideally, we have the option to buy it on the platform we want, or the storefront and or platform we want. Steam, Epic, wherever, or good old games if you're DRM, you don't like your DRM. Yeah, and various streaming services. We're still basically what Ted said. We're kind of in the spot now where it's like, well, you could use GeForce Now, but only some things are on GeForce Now. A lot of games, a lot of them aren't, because of competitive streamers like Microsoft. Like all of Bethesda's stuff was on GeForce Now in beta, but then when they launched, it got pulled because all the Bethesda stuff is now in Microsoft's Game Pass. Right. So, there's like the streamer wars going on there. Same thing. I mean, I think the prices are pretty good, honestly. Like you could just throw $5 or $10 a month at them. And it's not crazy for an adult. That's like, like you said, we spend that on random stuff all the time every month. I think that's why free-to-play games are so popular with kids and teenagers, because you don't need income. You need a device. But, most parents buy their kids some kind of device or whatever. So, they can just whip up a free-to-play game. Your Fortnites and your Apex Legends and your most of them are Battle Royales, it seems. But there's also Minecraft and all kinds of stuff. So it's all pretty good. It's funny you mentioned the try it out aspect, because I remember pre-ordering Anthem and getting hyped about it. Excuse me. And a friend of mine, also in Canada, it's a guy named Kyle, he and his girlfriend were like, you know what? We're not going to buy this. We're just going to subscribe to the EA like early access play thing. It's not a streaming service. Lets you download for like $15 for the month, and you get to try the latest games. So they tried it. They played it a bunch. Went, that was fun, but we don't want to keep playing. And then they only spent $15 on the game, whereas I spent $80 on the game. So I'm like, you know what? They were actually pretty smart to do that. I mean, I liked the game enough. I would have kept playing it more if like the support continued, but the plug got pulled on it. So I thought that was interesting, the try aspect. I mean, I still use the Steam or Epic refund option. I will try a game, and if I'm concerned, I will put a timer like on my phone for an hour or like 90 minutes, or an hour 45 max, because you have the 2-hour return window, and I will try a game. I did try some indie games lately. I tried Rogue Invader. Really interesting 1-bit game. It's like grayscale, black and white sort of grayscale. So it's super retro, roguelike, but it's made like with some modern sensibilities. The animation's amazing. Like it's actually phenomenal animations in the game. Like your little soldier. It's like a reverse thing. Instead of aliens invading you, you're going to their planet and invading them. But there's some like comedic thing where along the way, all your weapons and supplies got used up. So you have like one dinky pistol, So you keep getting dropped with like this tiny pistol, and of course you acquire more stuff as you go. It's one of those roguelite running things. I ended up refunding the game because it was too hard for me, but I think, within reason, you can buy and try games without a subscription service. Of course, you can't just abuse the refund system and like daily just buy, refund. Eventually, I think they would like ban you. But I've refunded a decent amount of games, but never that often. It's very intermittent, and it's like a couple a year at the most. So, and I suspect they also look at like, okay, how many games does this guy or gal have in their library? Like, how much money have they spent on Steam versus how much they're refunding? That's my speculation. And I've spent quite a lot, so they're probably like, oh, sure, fine, just give this guy his refund. Okay, Sam had a comment, it works pretty good if you have an Xbox controller. Right, I forgot it also works on iOS. See, I'm like so averse to gaming on anything that isn't a computer. I like blank out. I just blank it out. Apparently it works on iOS pretty good or something. Or an Android, iOS, Android. The PC Game Pass in the browser, yes, sorry, yeah. So, I don't know, maybe Ted, you were looking for games to play on your iPad. Maybe you want to check out the Xbox PC Game Pass now on iOS.
No.
It just gets ridiculous when you say that. No, sorry, one last positive, potential positive I wanted to add out there. We've seen it happen, be positive in some cases. These studios get bought by a much bigger entity, your Bungies, your your Blizzards or Activisions and so on. Or in case of Spire Media, they got bought by Saber Interactive. And they say, well, okay, we were making games before, but now this acquisition by the bigger entity, insert name here, is going to give us the resources we want to kind of make whatever game we want. That being, they don't say whatever game, but to like make bigger and better games. And I think just after Aspire got bought, they announced the Knights of the Old Republic remake, if I'm not mistaken. That being said, I believe they were posting game developer jobs before that. So I suspect they were already going to make it anyway, and it so happened they got bought. But in theory, I don't know if these guys give them a budget, like here's so many millions to make this game, and okay, maybe it's a Star Wars IP that's really popular, maybe we'll give you more. I don't know how it works. But as Ted was saying, we did see that with Halo. Bungie, well, now that we know, like not post-mortem, that would mean they died. We know, looking back through history, well, okay, Bungie was in dire straits. Back then, I was like, why did Bungie sell out? Weren't they like mega successful? As a teenager, I was like, I didn't understand. And I also didn't like pay attention to that behind the scenes stuff anyway. I was just like, this game's really popular. They're popular. Why couldn't they just keep making games as they were? Well, there's, business realities. So, but then, the question is like, are all studios who are bought struggling? I don't think so. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Could we say Bungie was struggling? No, they're like, okay, now, as far as we know, they're mega successful with Destiny. As far as we know. The Halo IP was owned by Microsoft, who owns 343 Studios or whatever, however that works. So to make Halo anymore. Destiny, though, has a ton of Halo DNA if you've ever played it. It's immediately obvious, like, within moments of playing. Like, there's a lot of Halo in here. Well, that's because it's made by Bungie. It's just Destiny. So yeah, my thought is, like... was like Bethesda struggling before they were bought? Before Bethesda was owned by ZeniMax, I think technically Microsoft bought ZeniMax, who owned Bethesda and a bunch of other people. There's all these weird, like, umbrella on top of umbrella, like, acquisition things going on. Was BioWare struggling before they were bought by EA? Well, they had 2 really bad releases in a row. But could you say they were tanked? They were still working on games. They were making Dragon Age 4. They were making a new Mass Effect game. All that was announced before they were bought, I think. So I guess, I don't know. What I'm getting at is, I hope these acquisitions give these studios, like, job security, I guess, or maybe bigger budgets, maybe more QA teams, maybe games will go through more testing or have less bugs on release. I don't know. A lot of games now, it's just all over the map. Some games are released really in a nice state. Some are released in a super buggy state and take, like, weeks of patching, and then they're good. Basically, there's no consistent variable, and it's kind of like, well, we have to wait and see. But my hope is, like, what could be good for gamers, players, consumers in these consolidations is, well, I hope it gives these studios that we know and love for so many years, whether you're an Activision-Blizzard fan or a Bungie fan or a Bethesda fan or a whatever fan, hopefully it gives these studios basically job security. Like, even if they have a bad release, they're not like tanked and they close and then they're employed and they're gone under. Hopefully they can keep going and keep making games because they have a much bigger studio behind them or a company behind them. Of course, they still have to, what do you call it? They don't have to pay their own bills, so to speak. They have to perform. They can't just release bad game after bad game, and Microsoft will be like, "Oh, this is fine." Eventually, if you just release nothing but bad games, I'm sure they'll get canned or something. And I believe that did happen with EA when they bought some people. I think even I can't remember the names, but I think even with some good performing studios, they just divided them up and canned them anyway or something. I forget who it was. Yes, it is Sam. Oh no, it isn't. Sam, his camera died. We're on camera on Discord. Anyway, basically we don't know. That being said, I weirdly trust Microsoft a lot more than I do Electronic Arts, because that's my impression from, I think it's Phil Spencer, who's the head of Xbox or gaming and Microsoft or whatever, unless I'm wrong with that name. Okay, interesting. Yeah, some technical issues. Maybe try disconnecting, reconnecting, Sam. Yeah, you've disappeared. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, we don't know if it'll help or hinder. Basically, I think it'll help them in some ways, potentially, quote unquote, hinder them by maybe there's some of these parameters we talked about earlier. Some restrictions you got to achieve certain margins, or maybe you have to play it safe. But maybe some companies will be more what do you call it? Freeform. Maybe they'll just be like, you know what? You're a proven studio with a track record. Go make a cool game if you have this cool idea. That could happen too. And maybe they couldn't have made this ambitious big game without a big budget from the person who bought them or something. We don't know all those nitty gritty details, so it's hard to say. But it has promise. It also has concerns. I wouldn't want to see things get even more consolidated than they already are. I think that's crazy. We mentioned a big three. There's really more of a big 4 to 5. The Ubisoft and the Square Enix. I'm a pretty big fan of Ubisoft, mostly because, well, A, I like a number of their games, but B, they're huge supporters of GeForce Now. So they don't port their games to Mac. I mean, long ago, we had the first couple of Assassin's Creeds.
Right, long time ago.
Yeah, 10, 12 years ago or something. They were great. Ubisoft I think they also own Settler games. We used to have a bunch of them on the Mac. What else? There's various older IPs, in which more in the early days, we had a lot of Mac. So these days they aren't releasing them on Mac, but they are at least apparently they're super happy with GeForce Now. They have all their stuff on there day one, or even I think in some betas and stuff, which is cool. So not Mac directly, but at least GeForce Now is well supported on Mac. So that's sort of a loophole.
That's a nice feature.
Yeah, it's a nice feature. They've got some cool IPs. They've also largely avoided getting in hot water from workplace scandals. There was one guy. There was one. He wasn't a CEO. He was a project director on Assassin's Creed or something. And apparently he was a bit of a scumbag, and he got let go or something. But otherwise, Ubisoft largely stayed out of any scandally hot water stuff. I mean, you can critique probably a lot about their games if you want, but they also put out. I like some of the stuff they do. I mean, I played through Assassin's Creed Valhalla a month or two ago. I thought it was a really freaking cool game. Assassin's Creed. A brief tangent here into Assassin's Creed. The current games are unrecognizable if you were an early fan. If you played an Assassin's Creed game 10 years ago and played one now, you'd be like, this isn't an Assassin's Creed game. What are you having me play? I can vaguely see elements of original Assassin's Creed here, but it's not an Assassin's Creed game anymore. They turned them from stealth adventure / action games into open world action RPG games with some optional stealth elements if you want to mess around with it. Which isn't necessarily bad. It's just a different game. Anyway, I'm rambling, but I like Ubisoft stuff because they support GFN. That's all. And Sam is back.
Oh, I am back, yes. One thought I had, just sort of cap off my thoughts on the streaming stuff is the music industry we've seen be extremely positive for the consumer when they move to streaming. $10 a month, whatever you cost, and you have every song with roughly 99.99% of songs you have.
Yeah.
There's no like Apple Music versus Spotify and versus whatever. There's extremely few songs that are exclusive to a specific platform, which is awesome. You no longer have to spend hundreds of dollars on like 15 different albums. If you want to listen to those 15 different albums or bands, you just pay $10 a month, you stream it all. With video or TV, specifically, we've seen kind of the opposite. Where I remember when Netflix first came out, by Netflix coming out, I mean the streaming side. They obviously existed long before streaming, but it was considered like the mecca of streaming. Like everything was on Netflix, as everybody would always say, and that's because they were the first, and they had nobody really cared. So they're like, oh yeah, you can license out whatever show you want for probably a very small fee. We don't really care. We don't consider you a competitor. Fast forward 10, 15 years to today, and like you have Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO Max. I don't know what the total cost is if you want to subscribe to all like the quote good ones, but it's pretty high. Kind of back to the cable days of just tons of premium channels.
Yeah, the new Halo series, which actually looks pretty cool. It's coming out on the very well-known streaming platform of Paramount Plus. It's like, WTF is that? Like, what? Yeah. Oh, here we go again.
I wonder if in like 10 years we'll see a more positive TV streaming, because like Paramount Plus, it's like, as like everyone can tell you that that's not going to succeed, but we got to give them a few years to go bankrupt, and then they'll get rolled in with somebody and one of the bigger names. So We'll see. Movies are obviously on streaming services, but the theater is still where movies make all their money, so to speak. So it's actually interesting with the movie industry. When streaming got big, they lost a big part of the revenue because they would make a ton of money off like rentals, like DVD rentals and like DVD and VHS purchases, and they kind of lost all that. They obviously still make some money off of like a Netflix deal or something. I'm talking like big movies, like, I don't know, the Disney ones or Lord of the Rings, whatever.
Yeah.
But they lost that, and that's why you see the movie industry being a little more safer, similar to the gaming industry, where they're like, well, we won't do this cool new IP. We'll just do a 12th Fast and Furious movie, or like the millionth Marvel movie, or whatever.
Exactly.
Or we'll reboot Jurassic Park for some reason, and like,
right.
So yeah, it remains to be seen how it'll pan out for the gaming industry. Hopefully positive and long term, but we'll see, I guess. I feel like music switched to streaming early enough that the suits couldn't mess it up, because they didn't really know what streaming was. But and now they're aware, so they got their business hands in.
My hope for streaming and gaming in general, and we've even talked about this last year, like, what is, never mind the future of Mac gaming, what is the future of kind of like gaming in general as technology progresses? But my hope for streaming is, as an advocate of it currently, even if I was a like hardcore PC gamer, I would still use streaming services in conjunction with also downloading games, because to me it's just very convenient, and I'm a person of convenience, I guess. But my hope is that eventually turns more like the music industry, where you don't need 3, 4, 5 gaming subscriptions to play what you want. You could just have one, or at least at the most 2. I guess that would be nice. So I really hope it doesn't fracture everywhere, because I'm pretty sure Ubisoft also has some kind of streaming thing going on, or
they do
something.
Ubisoft Plus, or I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, so this reminds me of like this Paramount Plus, or this, or it's like one studio having a streaming thing just for their games. It's like, well, that's not really enough to get me to subscribe to you. I need broader access. I need GeForce Now style. I need PC Game Pass style, where it's like a big library from a ton of different developers, a bunch of different genres.
Right.
Again, I really like Ubisoft stuff, but I would never subscribe to their streaming service. But I give them credit for not like pulling the plug on all their other streaming service, on like GeForce Now. they offer both. I
Right.
like that they're more open. Okay, I say that. You could be like, well, they made exclusivity deals with Epic Game Store, rah rah, they're not on Steam for a while, rah rah. Okay, well, that's there, and there's, in my opinion, a weird band of Epic haters out there, but everyone can like and hate what they want. I just don't think it's very reasonable necessarily from like a gaming accessibility standpoint.
One thing about GeForce Now, though, is, with your comment about Ubisoft, is that you actually have to buy the game. So whether you buy it from
Right.
Ubisoft or if you buy it from Steam or Epic, I don't know if Epic sells them, but I know Steam does. But since you bought the game, they're still happy with that. And if I would rather see it go that way, if it was going to go into streaming, where you could do a little bit of both. You could have a bunch of games with the service that were kind of the fluff, and then if there was a couple big titles from another studio or another major group, that you could actually purchase that and then play it through, like the front end. So that would be great. So the other studios wouldn't lose out if you bought a title from someone else, but you'd still have access to their catalog.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that reminds me of something else we were talking about before, or we considered as a topic, is one of the things Sam said is like, oh, you could have all the music you want. Well, I have a problem with that. I don't even know what music I want. When I was a kid, and that was a long time ago, I had one album, and I listened to the album, and I still remember every one of those songs. And
Nice.
nowadays, it's like, no, an album comes and goes, and it's like there's too much. And, or maybe, I'm not going to say there's too much, there's a lot. And, too much indicates it's a bad thing. It's like there's a lot. And, it was something we were kind of hashing over as a possible topic was, is it going that way? Are we getting so many things? One of those studios, are they going to release 50,000, little bitty games that came from nowhere and one or two big titles to try to attract subscribers, that type of a thing. So, I don't know. And it could go either way. It's nice to be able to try everything. I agree with what Sam was saying about, well, if it's there, I can download it, try it out, and if I don't like it, it's gone. And it's a real good, it's a nice feature. However, I don't know. I kind of like to play one game for a while.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. We're not gonna. It's worth we in fact might have 2 or 3 episodes planned around it. But just as a primer, Jeff Vogel, an long-term indie developer of creator of Spiderweb Software, although I think he also owns it along with his wife and maybe even another friend or family member, something like that. They've been creating indie games for 25, 30 years now. They have, I mostly remember them for the Geneforge games, but they have a bunch of others I think are even more popular. These old, really retro style, 25 years ago they weren't retro, but now, they certainly are now. Always like grand adventures, often like open worlds, lots of choices, cool games, honestly. I like their stuff. But he wrote a series of tweets and then a blog post basically positing there's way too many games. Which is what you were saying. And I've even noticed this in the last few years, not just with gaming, but less so with music, because again, I think that's a little broader. And of course, like you said, Sam, gaming is a commitment, usually, unless you're playing a really tiny casual game. Like, you buy a big game, it could be anywhere from 20 to 100-hour commitment. Like, you listen to a song or an album, it's not a 20 to 100-hour commitment. You could listen to it to 20 or 100 hours if you wanted to, but to go through it once, you don't need that much time. The average song is, 3 minutes or something? It could be even less. An album is an hour and a half or something, maybe less. Like, you don't need, imagine if every album released was like a 20-hour commitment to get through. It would be insane, right? So, then the question becomes, well, yeah, are there too many games? I absolutely agree. But there also should be options. So where's the balance between too many games and enough options? Well, that could be pretty narrow or super floaty. I think we have too many, just in general, but let's talk about entertainment in general, as it's not just gaming, because I've felt that, with the rise of streaming, it used to be earlier, like, I wanted to just watch this show or just this movie, and I would do it. But now it's like, well, I could watch, like, 1,000 different ones, and then sometimes it's just like, forget it. It's, there's nothing specific I want. So I've tried to avoid that in gaming, computer gaming, by being more specific, like, well, I want to play this game, or I want to play this genre, or, and I've had more success there, because sometimes there's shows, a family or friend is like, well, hey, have you watched the season X of this show? And I'm like, you know what? I watched season 1 and 2, and there's like 5 more, and I just kind of petered out. It's a good show, but I'm not really interested. So gaming, I think, has that problem a little less, although there are games that are meant to just be endless. And they want you to play it for 100 or 200 or thousands of hours, even like MMOs. I tend to avoid them. It's an interesting topic that bears having a lot of discussion around, from a player perspective, maybe from a developer perspective. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think you can look at that article by Jeff Vogel, and there's thousands and thousands of games that get released every month. And one good evidence for there being too many games, so to speak, is Sony used to release a blog every week with every game coming out on PlayStation, and they would just list them all in bullet form. And they stopped doing that about 2 years ago. So you can guess why they maybe stopped doing that. But I listened to some PlayStation podcasts, or one PlayStation podcast, and they used to read that blog post every week as part of the podcast, and you would know, or you would at least have heard every game that has come to that platform if you just looked at this blog post once a week. And you would see it slowly creep from maybe 1 or 2 games a week, or maybe 0 games a week. Way back in the day, like in the 90s or 2000s, you could easily go 2-3 weeks without a single game releasing on that platform.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, and when they canceled it, about 2 years ago, it was close to like 50, 60, 70 games every week. And
wow,
they don't do it anymore, obviously, but I would assume the number is much higher than that now.
Right.
And we see it at the App Store. Like, I have no idea how many apps are on the App Store, but
too many.
Too many.
Too many.
Where I think the platform holder, whether that be Steam or Apple with the App Store, or Sony with PlayStation, or however, they have kind of it's one of the major points of the platform is to kind of curate a little bit, but it seems less profitable to curate. So whether that just be they don't want to pay somebody, or they're like, well, we make 10 cents if this $1 game sells, so let's just put it on the store, even though it's cluttering the store and hiding games that would be better, that would take that spot on the list if that game didn't exist. And so I think anybody should be allowed to create a game, but I wish the platform holders would curate a little bit better. Steam does it a little bit with the Greenlight. Actually, is Greenlight still a thing? I don't know, but
it's gone.
Okay, well, never mind that. Steam doesn't do it anymore. Do they still charge $100 to post your game on Steam?
I think so.
I think that's totally fair. If it was totally free, we would imagine how many games we would see then.
Yeah.
So at least it's $100.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. No, there was a brief window where they were curating, like Greenlight went away. They said anything's allowed, and then everyone put a bunch of like adult, porn games and other like sort of stuff on there. And then they went like, whoa, and then like banned them all. And then they're like, screw it. And now just like, as long as you aren't like, School Shooter Simulator 2022, you can basically put your game on Steam no matter what it is. Maybe it has some warnings or in your preferences. You can exclude adult-rated games in your preferences if you want. Obviously, if your kid's using Steam, you should do that. I believe it's off by default, and you have to.
Yeah. I
believe the filter's on by default, and you have to turn it off or something.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can do a lot of filtering on Steam. You can actually filter by platform, which I've done, where you filter just the Mac, and you just do the things that affect, the Mac platform, which that's kind of nice.
I do that all the time. I do appreciate Epic Games Store for curating more. They do curate quite a lot, but their store is also like light years behind anyone else's. So it's like, I wish, but at least they have some curation going on.
Yeah. Well, Steam's gotten around it they literally have curators, which are, they don't pay them. They're just community curators. And I'm looking at my Steam homepage right now. There is suggested curators that I can follow.
That's a really good point. Right. They just offloaded it onto the Steam users, of which there are many.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I just want to end with this quote on the of the Jeff Vogel article. He calls this basically this excess of entertainment, whether it's music, games, movies, whatever it is. He calls it an indigestible, mountainous horde of distractions. But I think the key word here is indigestible, meaning you can't possibly consume it all.
Exactly.
Now, is any one person trying to? No. But go back like 15, 20 years, you could reasonably play most of the games on your platform of choice, like on an Xbox or a PlayStation or a Mac or PC. Like, okay, maybe not literally every single one because there was a bunch of like shareware fluff kicking around, or you go back further, it was like HyperCard games or something. But I recall buying and playing like as a kid because I worked for my father and his family biz, so I had some pocket money to buy games. I was buying a big game probably 4 to 5 a year or something, and then some smaller ones in between. I would save up my money, and every now and then I did have to wait to save up or something. Like Sam was saying, maybe you're spending all your money on X game, but I recall hitting like buying and playing most of the games I wanted, and not being like, oh, there's like 10 more, and I just don't have time. Maybe that was true, and I just don't remember. But now it is true. Like you got to pick, unless you're really rich and don't need to work and literally just sit on your bum and play games all day. Well, it still wouldn't be possible to play everything, but you probably could get through like a majority of the AAA stuff, assuming it isn't like an endless infinity game, which you just play forever. But it would still be difficult. It would require serious commitment in playing probably like 16 hours a day and then sleeping and then waking up and doing it again. So, yeah, it's really interesting. We'd like to dive into it more in more podcasts, but the Jeff Vogel article is worth a read. Does he have a name for the article? There are too many video games. That's literally the name of the blog post. Yeah. So it's an interesting topic. We'd like to hear more from the player perspective, from ourselves, also from Lily and Casper when they hop on. We would like to bring on, if Jeff Vogel agrees himself, onto the podcast, and maybe we can even snag some other dev, who may or may not have an opposing point of view. Because just to wrap this up, because we're running a bit over, but Jeff Vogel's positing not only are there too many games, we should stop young new developers from trying to make more games because they're just adding to the problem. And the problem is basically your game just goes into the black void and maybe only 5 or 10 people will play it. So like, what's the point? There's a lot to argue about that, but like both positive and negative, but that's like the summary of his blog post, and it's got some really interesting stuff, so read it, or if you don't want to read it, we'll be talking about it on the next couple shows. So yeah, that about wraps it up. Any other final comments, gents?
No, I have some, but I'll save them for whenever we discuss that topic in depth.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop myself from just launching into it because I find it really interesting. It's very interesting. Okay, so that'll wrap us up for episode 24. Thank you very much, Sam and Ted. And we'll be back soon with more goodness and maybe sort of a series of podcasts on this particular topic. So thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
A big thank you to Kevin McLeod for the intro and outro music. Be sure to check out his library on the web. You can find more episodes of our show on our website, macgamecast.com, or in all major podcast directories. If you enjoy the show, please consider commenting, following, or sharing. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.